House of the Dragon Season 3, when looking back at the season as a whole, is a bit of a puzzle for me. It was most certainly better on balance than Season 2, but for me still not close to capturing that magic that was the first season, for the most part. What I will say is this: I came into Season 3 with super low expectations. Season 2 left a sour taste for many fans for a multitude of reasons. And if I'm being honest, I was pleasantly surprised how much I enjoyed Season 3. While I didn't love it, I did enjoy the ride for what it was. And that's the issue I have when trying to review this season as a whole. I can't settle on if my enjoyment of Season 3 comes as a result of the bar being set so low by Season 2, or if Season 3 is genuinely just that much better. At the same time, there's also another lens we can look at this through. I don't think airing A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms 5 months before Season 3 helped in any way. For a lot of fans, the adventure of Dunk and Egg at Ashford Meadow was some of the most compelling and character-driven stories seen from Westeros on TV since the early seasons of Game of Thrones. So while Season 3 in my view was better than Season 2 of House of the Dragon, for many people it pales in comparison to A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. I believe if A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms had aired last year when originally planned, enough time would have passed when many would view Season 3 of House of the Dragon in a much more favourable light. I was, for the first few episodes of Season 3, making that A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms comparison, but I kind of began to realise they are both very different shows telling very different stories based off very different source material. Doing reviews this season has been challenging, and I actually found some of the comments a little bit overwhelming, which is something I've never had happen before in nearly 7 years of making videos. To the point I almost stopped doing the reviews altogether around episode 5 or 6. There was this trend, not just on YouTube, but everywhere, from Twitter to Reddit to TikTok comments, where if you expressed any criticism of House of the Dragon, you got branded a hater or a book elitist, moaning or complaining simply because it's the clickbait thing to do, to drive views. Then, at the same time in the same comment sections, if you ever say anything positive, you get branded a paid shill or sucking HBO's dick. It really became a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation. People got so caught up in their own tribalism, they utterly missed the fact you're able to both be critical of something and enjoy something at the same time. That there's this grey area of balance in the middle where we can all acknowledge that no, House of the Dragon isn't the best show on TV, but at the same time it still does a lot of things really well, for the most part. If I don't overthink it, I do enjoy it, even if I disagree with many of the creative decisions, and am baffled by some of the choices they willingly have made. I'm not going to go into this review episode by episode, breaking down every single detail, because I've kind of already done that with the weekly review. So I'm rather going to take a step back and look at the season as a whole thematically, and some of the story arcs within the wider context of the season. Talk about what I liked, what I didn't like, and what I thought was just okay. I think it makes sense to start with the positives first. I think casting James Norton as Ormund Hightower kind of signalled he was going to have a major role this season, much bigger than his book counterpart. And for the most part, I really loved what they did with him. A truly unhinged character who could just go off at any moment. I know it was a running joke in my reviews, but I just couldn't stop thinking of Dennis Reynolds from It's Always Sunny every time Ormund was on screen. I wouldn't call him an outright villain, because there are just as many bad people on both sides of the story. But it's rare we have someone so volatile as Ormund. I think the way they worked him into the Dragonseed plotline worked very well as well, and there definitely were shades of Tywin Lannister in his sheer confidence of his plan. If I had one issue with Ormund, I would say he was always going to be a one-season wonder of a character. They had to give him and the Tumbleton arc a lot of screen time, so viewers actually gave a damn about what was happening, given how vital it was going to be to the latter part of the season. It still strikes me as odd they didn't try and lay the groundwork for Tumbleton last season, giving them a bit more time and flexibility this year. But, as we know, HBO really fucked up the pacing of the story by cutting the episodes to 8 per season. Yes, Ryan Condal has made a lot of questionable choices willingly, ones I largely don't agree with. but HBO did drop the ball big time with that decision, and the ripples of it will be felt through the rest of the run of House of the Dragon and beyond. Aegon's arc was a surprise, but a welcome one. I had no idea going in what they were going to do with him this season, given he's effectively MIA in the books at this point in the story, so they had to invent something for him to do. He kind of had a bit of a soul-searching arc with Larys and Tyland this season, where he rediscovers himself, where it all culminates, I think, in the best scene of the season, with Sunfyre waking up and Tom Glencarny giving the performance of his life. Given this was a side plot, it was really impactful. Ormund Hightower was also a really pleasant surprise. I didn't care much about him last season, but his interactions with Criston Cole and desperately trying to save his life prior to the Butcher's Ball was very endearing, and he was a welcome addition to the Tumbleton arc, being a neutralising force for Ormund. You see that Gwaine is the true father figure for Daeron, not Ormund. I also really like the fact that as mad as it was to try and sue for peace with Daemon, it seems his idea could have a huge impact on how the endgame is adapted in Season 4 with the role of Corlys Velaryon next season. Helaena for me was another highlight. I love the fact she was given so much more to do this season, even if I felt the first half of the season was a little bit bland, mostly thanks to her being tagged along with Alicent's arc. Once Alicent was gone, she really did a lot, especially in the final 2 episodes where we truly get to explore her dragon dreams. Sadly, I do think changing the context of her death just didn't make it hit the same. But given how they'd already changed the context of Blood and Cheese and the lack of Maelor and Bitterbridge, her death in the show was always going to be very different. And yeah, I think it kind of worked with what they have established with the character. It makes sense they would pull in the connection to her dreaming with her death. Don't get me wrong, her arc as a whole does have some huge issues, but in the last 2 episodes, Fia Saban's performance were compelling enough to mask that fact. I've been a bit 50-50 with Rhaenyra this season. I really did like the fact that we're starting to see shades of book Rhaenyra come through, that we're starting to see her mentally start to decline and become more and more erratic and untrusting. I don't think they're going to go full make all with teats in the show, but I'm at least happy we're getting something akin to it. I do just wish they pivoted to this slightly more book-accurate Rhaenyra a little bit earlier, because Emma Darcy is playing this more unhinged character so well, giving them so much more to do than be a passenger in their own story. There's a reason I say 50-50, because while I did enjoy what they were going for, Rhaenyra was haunted by the same old issues that have lingered since Season 2, and sadly those issues are just too core to her character in the show, namely her toxic relationship with Alicent Hightower. Now to the okay stuff. There was a lot of hype for Daeron Targaryen, and sadly while his story was okay, I don't think it quite lived up to the expectation, because frankly, book and show Daeron are fundamentally different characters. I did think his dynamic with Ormund was interesting, and I didn't hate the whole Ormund declaring him king aspect, but I think the payoff really should have been the viewer seeing him do something meaningful during the last battle. I'm not even saying fighting, maybe have him be the one trying to negotiate with Daemon. Yeah, it would have been dangerous and wouldn't make perfect sense, but certainly more interesting. I think the lack of the Battle of the Honey Wine and Bitterbridge changed who Daeron is as a character and the role he has in the story. Thus why Ormund still knighting him the Daring is a bit of an odd choice for me. I actually don't mind the brown hair, as it low-key makes sense why Alicent would choose to foster him away, outside of trying to have one son being a Hightower, as the core of her argument against Jace, Luke and Joffrey is how un-Targaryen they look. Sending her un-Targaryen son away tracks. I really don't think Ryan Condal wanted to include Daeron in the show. It's really odd they didn't do this in Season 2, and I think the fact we're getting him now is a direct result of backlash from fans and the media. Nearly every interview for Season 2 would have some kind of question about Daeron. I've heard some rumours from some people that I used to work with in the industry that including Daeron in Season 3 was very much a HBO thing and not a Ryan Condal thing. Take that as you will. Battles throughout the season were fine for the most part. The Gullet, while wasn't what I was expecting, did the job, and the same goes for Tumbleton and the Butcher's Ball. I really do think how they handled the fish feed though was an utter travesty. Yeah, I get not doing the red fork. Showing that off screen is fine, I don't think the fish feed needed to be a full-scale battle. They could have just done it like the Burning Mill in Season 2 and show the horrific aftermath, just a mountain of dead floating in the God's Eye. It's one of those battles that is supposed to get across to the reader, and thus the viewer, the true cost of war. Instead, we've got a silly song that misses the whole point of what George was going for. I personally love Aemond and Alys at Harrenhal this season, mainly because of the huge lore drops, and I do find their relationship fascinating, and the implications it could have to the wider lore, given where Alys's story ends in Fire and Blood, and the fact it's one of the most mysterious parts of the book. However, I will concede the point that for more casual fans, it did drag on a bit. But I don't think this is a Season 3 issue, or an Alys and Aemond issue. I think they spent so long filling time with Daemon at Harrenhal last season, it kind of makes Aemond's arc seem a bit copy and paste, almost redundant. It's almost like they gave Daemon a bulk of Aemond's intended Harrenhal story last season thematically. Thus, when it came time to actually do Aemond's book arc this season, it kind of seems redundant and pointless unless you know as a book reader where the story's going to go. So I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with the Harrenhal arc in Season 3, just they spent so much needless time there last season. Now, going into Season 3, Rhaenyra taking the place of Nettles was a huge talking point, and while I still am not a huge fan of this, it was better than I thought it was going to be. I think Daemon's role in it really carried the storyline through 90% of what they were doing, with Rhaenyra's actions not really making that much sense at all. My main issue is I just can't see how this is going to work in Season 4 and kind of reaching the end game of the story. But they will just come up with some convoluted logic to make it work, which I guess is fine. Now, the bad. And yes, like Season 2, this is mostly going to revolve around Alicent and Rhaenyra. Alicent's plotline this season was utterly wild and not in a good way. If you told me the narrative peak of her arc this season would be her being sent by Rhaenyra to assassinate her own son at Harrenhal, I wouldn't have believed you. It's some of the craziest off-the-wall shit the show's done. Even weirder than Alicent going to Dragonstone to have a meeting with Rhaenyra last season. So much of Alicent's screen time this season was her simply treading water while the rest of the plot caught up. So much of her actions make so little sense. Even the escape attempts with Helaena, while on paper, could have been interesting. The whole process of how they did it was devoid of any logic at all. In fact, I swear to God, they just copied and pasted the same plotline twice this season, in terms of the escape attempts. Her reaction to Otto's death was almost non-existent. I know they made huge changes to her arc in Season 2, making her part of the plot that allows for the fall of King's Landing to Rhaenyra. But her direct actions resulted in her father's death, and we got minimal to no reaction. I think it would have been so much more impactful if Alicent was actually present. And plus, that would have given so much more conflict for Rhaenyra in that moment, where you have Alicent on one side, Daemon on the other, who's encouraging her to kill Otto. And it just makes Daemon seem so much more diabolical for pushing Rhaenyra down that path. Though I guess at this point in the story, she had already agreed to kill Aegon and Aemond, so I'm not wholly surprised they went down this road. The worst part of this is Olivia Cooke is such a good actress and could really do something special if Alicent as a character had the backbone that she displayed in Season 1, that fire, that venom and drive to protect her children that made her this powerful character in the first place. I think for me, the worst thing about this season, however, is that we are now 3 seasons deep. The war has been raging. So many people close to Alicent and Rhaenyra have died, have been murdered. And yet, Ryan Condal and the writers still cannot let go of this need to force this friendship between Rhaenyra and Alicent that should have just died the moment Aemond kills Luke, or Blood and Cheese murder Jaehaerys in front of his mother. With only 8 episodes per season and 16 episodes to finish the show at the start of Season 3, screen time needed to be used wisely. Yeah, I think we maybe got 6 or 7 of these Alicent and Rhaenyra scenes, where literally nothing meaningful happens, week after week. To the point it's almost like they just copy and pasted the same scene over and over again and just changed it slightly. There are so many other characters who could have used that screen time. Baelor, Adam, Corlys, Daeron, phew. Hell, they could have even started setting up the Moon of Madness or the Shepherd or something like that. I hope that Helena's death and the fact Rhaenyra has started to lose it is the wake-up call Alicent needs next season, and we're not going to spend so much time repeating this same story-beaten scene over and over again. Like I said at the start of this review, my expectations were very low going into Season 3 because of, well, Season 2. So in many ways, I was pleasantly surprised by Season 3. Visually, it's a great looking show, and I can't fault a majority of the actors' performance and dedication to the roles. It all comes back to the writing. It's just so hit and miss. When it's good, it nails it, but when it's bad, it's really poor. As the show has gone on, sadly, it has become more bad than good most of the time. Some of the choices Ryan Condal has made really do baffle me, and while I'm sure he has his own reasons for them, from an outside perspective, they just seem almost random. If you look at my episode scores, each week they range from as low as 6 to as high as 8, with most of them being around a 7, which for me is kind of an average score. Not bad, not great. Some stuff I really liked, some stuff not so much. And I think that 7 out of 10 is a fair reflection on the season as a whole. I think as someone who loves the world and writing of George R. R. Martin, so definitely colours my perception of the shows, which is something I cannot really help. And while 7 is a good score, I can't help but be a bit disappointed in what could have been for House of the Dragon. Season 1 for me had so much potential. Even some of the bigger changes from the book I think worked well as part of the bigger picture. For example, I did quite enjoy Alicent and Rhaenyra's relationship in Season 1. If it had just stayed in Season 1 and evolved and changed. Even with the plot changes they were going to have to make, House of the Dragon could have been just as good as peak Game of Thrones, but for so many different reasons. From HBO to the writers, House of the Dragon could have just been so much more. But here's the thing, they did drop the ball heavily with Season 2. From poor writing, the issues with the writers' strikes, HBO cutting episode counts, all played a role. But I think so much damage was done because of those things. Season 3 was always going to be an uphill battle. And when you frame it like that, I think it's genuinely surprising Season 3 turned out as good as it did. Better by far than Season 2, but still not as good as Season 1. While I don't think they can reach that Season 1 level again with Season 4, I am more hopeful after Season 3 it can maintain a decent level of quality. I made this comparison a lot during the reviews for each episode. But Season 3 of House of the Dragon really did remind me a lot of Game of Thrones Season 6, where it's not exactly peak level Game of Thrones, but not the utter drivel that was Season 8, and to some extent elements of Season 7 as well. It's still a show that I can sit down and enjoy as long as I don't actually think too hard about it and overthink things slightly. I really do believe there's a balanced approach to looking at House of the Dragon. It's not the best show ever. It's not the worst show ever. It's okay to hold either of those opinions. It's okay to be a bit in the middle like myself. I think the state of TV as a whole right now, and all the issues within the industry that came as a result of COVID and then the writers' strikes, is a lot to be desired. I can only think of a handful of shows right now that are legitimately 10 out of 10 week after week. So maybe, given the sorry state of entertainment in 2026, okay isn't actually that bad.